but trust me, 10 years from now, that's going to look dated, and 20 years from now, people will be redoing those once again. But the ones that stick to the original design, there will always be a group of us that will appreciate those, because we'll know that they represent a certain period of time, that they have a certain way of kind of thinking through architectural issues that's consistent. And I think that that's the most important thing. When I look for a house, I look for a house that hasn't been touched very much, because I want the kind of consistent thinking that the architect had when it was being planned. And as soon as it gets remodeled, I don't care how sophisticated, that starts to change. And when that starts to change in the wrong hands, it all goes downhill really quickly. And so I spend most of my time looking at houses thinking of how I would take it back to what it once was. And so I really appreciate that in Coral Gables there is a strong emphasis on the historic past and the preservation of villages like this one, which I think is really remarkable. So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the outside of this building, in terms of its architectural history. But Alicia, I think, has very interesting points of view on living in this house and then really working with the structure and then decorating it in this remarkable way. So I turn it over to you, Alicia.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on a Sunday at this time, on a hot day. And I'm so glad you're here, because I enjoy, like I'm sure many homeowners, there's a certain joy to share what is part of our past, the architectural past. The story of Henry, the architect, I was given the book sort of by the previous owner. It's sort of a daisy chain of information, and just seeing how a young person who was so inspired by all the architecture, and he was young when he built these. I mean, I don't remember his exact age, but there's so much energy that's in this house. That's an interesting thing about the Chinese village, is that the energy has been contained. The ownerships of the various homes, there haven't been a lot of passing of hands. For example, this home, I would go every day from Coral Gables, where I lived in another historic home, to preschool. And I was like, well, that is so interesting, so interesting. Well, one day there was a for sale sign. In all the years I would go to preschool, there was no for sale sign, and then finally it became available. It was the first house available in 32 years in the Chinese village. And Mr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson, was the provost of UM. He was a marine biologist. He had a koi pond that could actually keep bugs away. So we have to find him. I do have his phone number, because he left some amazing story there in the koi pond. But he was the first person to pass the hand, to sell in the village. And so there were families. For example, there's two families that are they own 3 or 4 homes. This lot was once a family lived next door. So as our lots changed, like Tim said about the gates and the walls and the fences, is because I think this was open, because they were family members. This home and the house next door, which has the beautiful, it's worth going out into the heat to see the beautiful version next door, because that is a different prototype. They're all relatively large, except for that one is interesting, because now it's currently a triple lot, having been taken half of our lot at some point in time. But they have a very small home, but they have an upstairs walk-around balcony. So when I was able to buy this house, we really were I grew up in Tuxedo Park, which is a historic town in upstate New York, well known for its architecture, and I wanted to raise a family in a historic home. I think it's magical for children. I think it creates imagination, fantasy. You can go into the attic. The attic's crazy. The way that it was built, when he's not kidding when he say it's well built, and the time when in today's day and age where children just plug in or check out, or there is something about living in a magical home that will leave something in the soul, and I think that's enriching. We were left with this house, which hadn't really been done much. We added all of the crown molding and all this wainscot. I'm obviously a wallpaper lover, so that you can see is pretty much everywhere. This room, as Tim mentioned, belonged outdoors. There were 3 owners in this house, and the second owners had a ballroom dance class, like a Brazilian class. Wow. And the ballroom dance studio was in here, so Mrs. So-and-so, Mrs. Ballroom Dance Lady, this was her ballroom dance. And everyone would come here and not go to Riviera Country Club for ballroom dancing. So they would come here and they would have ballroom dancing. So actually, these windows and this wall are the structural wall. This is the courtyard, and this had 2 doors, and this would all have been outdoors. This was, we're behind you all, where the keyhole is, that it was an outdoor patio, and this was the dining room. So the actual entrance to the house came along this side of the house, which made sense because the lots had not been cut up and, you know, that whole thing. So now, which is why Paloma, who is our Feng Shui expert, will explain to you what is the correct front door in this house. Because if it was done on Chinese architecture, that all made sense at one time. So there's some interesting points there. So if there's anything that you'd like me to elaborate on, I can tell you that all the windows are original, all the hardware is original, the floors are original, they were sanded down 3 times. The height is original. The only thing I probably added pretty much was a little bit of woodwork, and the kitchen is actually the original footprint. And we honor everything that is traditional and everything that is, you know, as Tim said, I'm like you. I like to go in and you know, you get its essence and its energy of the people that lived here and the you know, authenticity of its original architecture. We have a great fireplace, so it gets cozy. Anytime it drops below 70, we have fireplace. Open up all the French doors. Their balconies will go upstairs. Their balconies off every bedroom, and so come November, December, January, you're sleeping really under the stars, and that's really special. So welcome to our house, and thank you for coming.